data pathway, so to speak. What type of suggestions do you feel like giving to those trade unions that, like us, find themselves at the beginning or at the end of a pathway? I don't know where to see it, whether the beginning or the end. Perhaps also the end of one piece or the beginning of something of even greater scope. Not to standardize, but because I think that standardization is much more complicated, but rather to normalize. What type of advice do you feel you can give us with reference to possible guidelines to give to trade unions like us that embarked on this? And so after this research, they want to produce something tangible, something practical, and they want to give a soul to these figures and to this data. We focused on many elements, on many efforts, and now we ask the doctors in the medical sense of the term. And what advice do you think you can give us with reference to this element?
Okay, thank you very much for this very interesting question. I was a bit puzzled 3-4 weeks ago when I was invited for this meeting, and when I heard slightly coming the question of would it be possible to combine Romex or the ETOI, EWC database and our representativeness studies. I thought, what the hell is that here? These things have absolutely nothing to do with each other. But since Volker insisted a little bit, I took the idea serious and I thought it over several times. So I was questioning myself, how could you make, you as trade unions, you as EWC members, how could you make use or what could this data out of, or these reports out of these rep studies have any significance for you? So I thought about 2 ways. Of course, who am I to limit you on this? If you have any other ideas how to make good use out of it, go ahead. But I think there are 2 ways how you could make good use out of it for your trade union work. First of all is a lot of European Works Council members are member of a trade union, but not all of them. It happens that you are in a European Works Council where you have sometimes a member who is very active, very constructive, but not a member of a trade union. And sometimes there are people who are like coming from a country where there's in your company absolutely no organization structure. And then after a while, if this representative becomes very active, he or she might be interested to become eventually a member of a trade union, but he might maybe, or she might maybe not immediately know which one. In that case, I could say maybe at that moment it would make sense to go and look at the rep study of the sector where this multinational is involved in and look at which are the trade unions that are organizing in that specific country, that sector, and like that you could give some information to this person on the basis of this data. I don't know if this makes sense, but that was my first idea that I came up. A second one is that you have a lot of European Works Councils. Volker again knows that best of all, who are developing a negotiation capacity, and some of them are even making agreements. There are even other things that happen that sometimes trade union coordinators in the European Works Council sign on behalf of European industry federations. I will not look at them. But if you would do something like that as a European Works Council, make an agreement with management, or if you would sign a document on behalf of a certain trade unions, then such a rep study might eventually, it's not completely fit for purpose, it's not 100% fitting the exercise, because it doesn't mean that trade unions and employers representative in a certain sector will definitely also be representative for a certain multinational company, but it could be a start of the exercise. So what I am like not telling you to do, because this is your role, but it could be like, imagine you make an agreement that is going to have a significant impact on the working conditions of workers in a multinational company in different countries. You could then eventually go and take a look at which are the trade unions that are organizing this sector in the different countries. Why the hell would you want to do this? Now, we all talk about collective bargaining, the power of trade unions and employers in collective bargaining. You had it very much centralized long time ago. There's the trend of decentralization. In a certain way, the agreements made by multinational companies are, this is indicated in studies, a little bit eroding the negotiation capacity of trade unions and social partners at sectoral level in the different countries. So it could be relevant that you look at, before you make such an agreement, that you inform and consult the trade unions in that sector involved to avoid that you're hindering collective bargaining in a sector in a certain country. These are my two ideas, what I thought how you could, as a trade union, make use of information out of these rep studies. If I say stupid things, then you can simply tell me later and or correct or complete me.
Peter.
Okay, very briefly, I will make a more general comment maybe, but I think that the relationship or the position that ETY is in as the European Trade Union Institute is sometimes very difficult, because we admittedly do a lot of useful research, but we are not good at translating it onto national level. And that's where projects like this, that's where national trade unions come in, I think. And it's a symbiosis that we should live actually in, because you are the ones who know what is necessary on national level. You are the ones who know what the EWC members need, what the trade unions who are also involved in the information consultation system, what are their needs, what are their expectations. We do not always know that very well, or as well as you do. We try to be creative, we try to meet the expectations, but we are sitting in Brussels and we have limited resources in terms of people. So if now a project like MuMMIA, if now activities like those undertaken by CGL can marry the national reality and your national research with what we do on a more general basis, I think this is where the most benefits can come from. Because the feedback that we receive quite often is that the research we do on the European level in Brussels is useful, but few people know about it. And this is exactly the dissemination part of our research. It makes little sense if we only do it for ourselves and if it's not disseminated further, if people are not aware of that, if people do not know that there is a database of EWCs, that when EWC is thinking about going to court, that they are not alone in that there are more than 50 cases across Europe and 50 other EWCs that have already went to court, and one could learn from that. If the EWC on national level, if the national reps sitting on EWC do not know that there is a database of around 1,000 good and bad practices that could help them in negotiations, that means that it's a resource wasted. And I think that this is exactly where, the project like MuMMIA and our contribution meet halfway. From such cooperation, I think this is a more general comment, but I think that from such cooperation, if you in your project, for your national members and the practitioners really, if you can ask us questions and if you can push us to explore new areas, to provide you with data, this is how I think both sides benefit, because we, from such a participation, the ETY learns as well. We get the feedback on what is important, what is necessary, and this is where the mutual benefit comes into play, I think.
Beh, questo perlomeno è lo spirito.
At least this is the spirit that drove us, as you are saying. I share your view so much so that for this project we had a great involvement and a strong relationship with the ETUI, and we shared various issues with reference to the data that is rather boring, but it's still very fascinating and interesting. And in including Eurofund in the final conference for MuMMIA, having reached the end of this project, it might be a building block to reason in